Good afternoon. Good afternoon. November. So, I want to talk about a few things today. I want to talk about budget as we move through into the budget cycle adjustments. I want to talk about Glenmore Landing and where that application is at. And I just want to touch on Remembrance Day and the activities that are happening around the city. So just want to do that. So first, a big thanks to everyone who came out on Monday night for the community conversation, and for those who have taken the time to watch back on YouTube. And if you haven't watched back on YouTube, you can go back and watch it on YouTube. We'll also be sharing out some clips from that evening in the coming weeks. There are some great questions that we got from community members ahead of time that we were able to answer that night. So wanted to talk about that and just remind everyone that they can watch back. And one of the reasons we live stream, of course, is so that there can be that watch back opportunity. We know that everyone lives very busy lives. They can't always make it out. And so having that opportunity to watch back makes a lot of sense. I'm also rocking a bit of a cold, so I am going to take lots of sips of liquid throughout this 15-minute Friday. All right, I want to talk about budget and unpack some things that have happened through our budget preview that happened earlier this week, and then some comments that I have seen online, and try to do a bit of a breakdown on how it works out. Because one of the biggest comments that I'm hearing and seeing is that with the property tax increase, how that gets split out between the different property types, and definitely the impact that is coming to condos this year. And so recognizing that. So we only have the ability to make so many property subtype classes. And so Calgary has basically residential and non-residential property subclass types. So the tax rate, we have one tax rate that then gets applied to non-res, and we get one tax rate that gets applied to residential. And how we do that is by a split. So I'll break it down into super simple numbers. $1,000. Let's say we need to collect $1,000 worth of property tax. We say X percentage needs to come from residential, and then the other X percentage needs to come from non-residential. So, and I think we're at a 53-47 split. That ratio, we also need to be in a ratio of the total taxes then collected in that. It needs to be less than 5-1. So we cannot collect more than $5 in res to non-res. We are almost at that $5. We're at about 4.37 to 1 is the ratio that we are at, which is why we've been doing subsequent tax shifts to shift more of the tax burden onto residential customers every single year, because that is also what makes us Municipal Government Act compliant. So that's provincial legislation that we have to be compliant with as a city. So this is why res numbers have gone up a little bit more in the last couple of years. And it is also because that tax shift has been avoided. So prior to when this council took office, tax shift was on the books. It was never done. And we have slowly crept up closer to that 5-1. And now just the way that valuations are going, it's getting harder to manage because we didn't do it before. I just need to move something under my feet. Okay. Sorry, everyone. We're not really set up great today. So that sets the basis and the stage. So then what happens is that number gets further broken down based on the valuation of your property. So the more your property is valued at, the more you pay in taxes. What has happened in the market in this past year is that the valuation of condominiums has gone up by 10.5%. That is the biggest jump in a long time. I actually think on our first year that we did budget as a council, it was a negative number. So taxes actually dipped for that group. And now they have shot up because the property values of like single detached homes have stayed a little steadier. They have been rising, but not to the same. And then this past year, condos have gone up. So the tax bump for condos is going up much more this year. We have no way to offset that because it is simply based on the valuation of your property, because we have only two tax classes, res and non-res. It is all based on valuation. So it is not about asking those who have less to pay for those who have more. It is simply on assessed value. And it sucks. I 100% agree. It totally sucks. But if we're to look back historically, the creep in condo property taxes has been, if not a decline, a much, much slower slope than what we've seen in single detached or even like detached or sort of attached to like duplexes, fourplexes. So that is part of it. So a lot of it is just market dynamics that have come to roost. So this is why having more properties generally and trying to slow the rate of inflation in property values by having more supply is really, really important. So the other myth that I'm hearing is that population, so we account for population growth in our projected growth. So why doesn't population bring us more taxes? We only collect on property value. So the home that I live in, whether there's one person living here or 3 people living here or 6 people living here, that doesn't bring more revenue. The number of people in the house doesn't bring more revenue. The only thing that brings more revenue for the city is the valuation of this property. And so while we have a record number of people moving to Calgary, we may have more persons per household. So their income doesn't affect our overall revenue. It affects it at the provincial level. And so you'll see a surplus at the provincial level from increased population because of increased income taxes at the provincial level, but it doesn't work that way at the municipal level. And then it costs more to deliver services to more people. And you might ask yourself why. So transit is a partially subsidized service that we offer. Recreation is a partially subsidized service that we offer. So let's do transit. So let's say it costs $100 a year to run transit for people. Fares offset about 33% of that. So that means it costs us $67 a year to run transit for people. Now, the more people that take transit, the more that number goes down. But we also then need to add more buses or trains for the number of people. And so it's this incremental growth thing that happens. And so more people taking transit costs us more because we need to run more service. And so that is why population growth costs us more to service. So that's just one place that you might see it. Recreation, the more people that use our rec facilities, right? So things like the cost of water might go up. So more people showering in our rec facilities, your entry fee only offsets a portion of that. It's more electricity, it's more lifeguards. So the more staff we need to have. So yeah, even so like transit, if we need more operators. So that is why population increases drive up the cost of operating, because we have to do more for that many people. I would also say one of our biggest line items is just corporate inflationary pressures that we are seeing, like most businesses and like most homes. And so we do need to do cost recovery on that. And we do that cost recovery, yes, through property taxes. And so it is things like, so if we take snow clearing, for example, gas is just costing more per kilometer. Maintenance on our vehicles is costing more per kilometer. We know that wages have gone up through union bargaining. These are things that have all been in the environment. The cost of, yes, I said maintenance, the operating costs, like these, the cost to create pickle and to put pickle out. So that's the de-icing. So all of those costs have escalated across the corporation when we look at the capital side. And so these are just operating costs. So capital costs, of course, some of your tax goes towards life cycling in capital, but the majority of it is just day-to-day operating. And so the alternate to raising taxes is to raise fares and fees. So we could say, okay, we're going to offset some of that by increasing fares and fees on transit or increasing fares and fees at recreation. So these are conversations that we have to have. When we look at it on the balance of a whole, the amount that we would have to increase fares and fees for transit riders or recreation users, it is much higher than the average cost to do it through through spreading it out across everybody. So transit fares would probably have to double. Whereas if we were to increase transit, like the cost to operate transit across all people, across the entire city, it's maybe only 25 cents per person versus $2.50 per ride. And so when we start to look at the economics of it all, this is where spreading it out through tax increases gets us the best service, and it spreads it out across the most amount of people. often the people who are using our subsidized services. So, and again, it's not a blanket statement, but a lot of people using our subsidized services are in the lower income brackets. And so we are ensuring that affordability as a whole is at its best for everybody. And that is through tax supported services. So that is a bit of a budget breakdown that we go through every year. The biggest thing at a budget, so beyond base inflationary pressures, is we continue to invest in the things that Calgarians have been asking us for. And this is our citizen satisfaction survey that we get every single year, and we've made investments. So the biggest investments we've made have been on transit, so both transit hours and transit safety. We continue to invest in those things. We have put a ton of money into our base to have more peace officers. One of the biggest changes that we're making is to make sure that peace officers and transit peace officers can come through our 911 services. So we're making changes so that our 911 dispatch can be more responsive with the appropriate service being dispatched. So we're not dispatching police necessarily to everything or fire necessarily to everything. We can dispatch bylaw, or we can dispatch transit peace officers and peace officers. So that is a major improvement that is coming through some of the tax supported investments that we're doing, is changes to our 911 system. That's a really, really big deal, because it means the right service is coming and we're not overpaying for service calls, because we know it costs more for CPS to go than bylaw. So these are important things. So you got to spend to save. So that's a big one. We continue to invest in fire. So we are adding more money in the base so that we can have four persons per truck. So to get all of our trucks, all of our apparatus staffed to 4 people. Why does that matter? It matters because there are international firefighting targets that say how many fire people need to be at an incident within a certain number of minutes. That minimum number is 4. So if you actually have 2 people on a truck, it means you're always sending 2 trucks. So if you're sending 2 trucks, that's twice as many kilometers. If you send 1 truck, you're reducing that. So in the long term, it is savings and it is safety. So these are really important safety measures that we've been adding in and building into our base. So the tax increases that have come through this council is recognizing and making up for the tax cuts that have come before. So roads is a big one. So more paving is coming, more improvements to mobility networks, better snow clearing for pedestrians and around transit stops. So these are all the investments that council's been making based on citizen satisfaction surveys. Housing has been a huge one. We've put a ton of money into housing, and we are reaping the rewards of it. So we have lots of non-market land sales coming out. If you've been paying attention to the news, there's been, I can think of at least 4 housing announcements that have come in the last kind of 2 months that have come. So the strategy is working, but it takes an upfront investment from the city to kind of kickstart some of that. Downtown revitalization has been a big one. We have essentially maxed out downtown revitalization dollars, and we have people asking us for more, but it in turn is improving the number of housing units that are happening downtown and the property values that are happening downtown. So investment is working across our city, and we're continuing to make those investments in a lot of key areas, but as well as the wraparound supports and the wraparound things that are happening. So there was, we got it approved last year, the money in the base from better parks and playground upgrades. I was a big champion for that. That is staying there. So better parks and playgrounds coming to your neighborhoods at a faster rate of turnover of those older playgrounds than we were having before. But the cost to you, yes, is going up in your taxes, but hopefully you should be seeing things on the return. So if there's things you're noticing, they're like, yeah, I did notice we're getting a little bit better here, or I'm still not seeing improvements here, let our office know, because we can help strategically direct where some of those investments go, or where we can be talking about needing more or having to rethink how the program is working or running. So that's really important, I think, when it comes to budget, is just also understanding where it's playing out. And so we can probably go through our ward, and we're talking about this. Where can we show you where this is happening? Playgrounds, off the top of my head, Braeside, Douglas Glen, Kingsland. These are all places where we're talking about playground replacement and improvement for those older areas, and we hope to have more coming. Okay, that was a lot on budget, and now I'm running short on time. I'm going to keep digging into budget and specific investments in the next week, so that you have a really good idea of what we're spending, where that's going, and what you're getting for it, and how we're building off of past successes and building off of what Calgarians are telling us. Yesterday, Glenmore Landing application went through Calgary Planning Commission. So a couple really quick highlights. I put a statement out on the website today. We'll also get it across social media. So that's sort of a bit of a summary on where the application is at and what came forward at Planning Commission. For you to know that. The biggest thing to know, it is coming to council December 3rd. I am going to request to make it a timed item so that those members of the public who do wish to speak for it know exactly when we're starting. And so I will likely probably ask for it to be the first item after lunch. Stay tuned. I don't have that confirmed yet. Once I know, we'll tell you. So the biggest thing that we've heard was shadowing and heights into the adjacent community of Haysboro. We have, for all intents and purposes, done our best. There's a few tweaks I'm hoping to make to continue to mitigate some of those shadows. There's a few that I have some concerns about, so we might need to do a little bit of rejigging, but for all intents and purposes, based on the times and the measurements that are standard across applications, we have pretty much minimized shadows into Haysboro. And that's a really, really big deal because we know that was one thing that community was really, really concerned about, and the applicant has worked on that with administration. The other thing that we heard about was the land use on the existing parcel. So the existing shopping center, originally there was originally it wasn't in there, and then administration was really pushing for it to be in there. And so then RioCan did put in an application for land use changes, including the residential and the proposed densities on the shopping center site. And the community said, we are not ready to have that conversation. We need to stay focused on just what's happening on the surplus lands. And so it was removed. If you watch the Planning Commission said, why isn't it there? I don't think administration gave the best answer, but Troy eventually got around to it. But essentially that's what it was administration was responding to community saying, we're not ready to have that conversation yet. We need to see how this first part of the build out goes in the next 10 to 20 years. And who knows what is going to be happening in land use in the market. And then we will talk about the shopping center conversation, or when the applicant is truly ready to move on the shopping center application, then we'll have it. But what we did get was a policy framework that talks about the envisioning of that area and how it will complement the residential. It also talks about a lot about the investments that need to get made around the surrounding infrastructure, roads, pathway upgrades, all of that. So that is in there. We'll put the link to it on the website and across socials. But suffice to say, it is responsive to community concerns. I recognize that some people want no density there. I understand that. I think when we think about where housing makes sense, and this is a site that I've always said makes sense for housing, what is coming forward is good. Through development permit applications, we can make it great. But that also requires community involvement to some degree too, and understanding it. So, but it talks about a lot of phased and staged and the things that have to happen. There's more in the statement. So please take a look at that. Okay, running out of voice power. Remembrance Day is Monday. Today, first, I will acknowledge it is Indigenous Veterans Day. Indigenous people fought in both wars. They often gave up status to do that. We have Satina, which is just west of us, which was used, even though it was a nation, even though it should have been under government protection, used as training. So there continues to be shells, and they are continue to actually really advocate for the federal government to do proper cleanup on that area of undetonated materials. So there was a whole portion of their land that they cannot even use because that land was essentially seconded for use. So it is Indigenous Veterans Day. And so just acknowledging and recognizing the first peoples of our nation who fought for the sovereignty of our nation in both wars. So very important. Remembrance Day is Monday. There are lots of events happening across the city, specifically in Ward 11. There is one at North Glenmore Park with the King's Own Regiment. There is one at Peacekeepers Park with the Peacekeepers. Horton Road Legion has one. Now, of course, military museums live streaming. There's one at the Jubilee if you want to be inside. There is one at the Cenotaph at Memorial Park. CPKC, so Canadian Pacific Kansas City, has one in Ogden. If you're sort of in like the Riverbend Douglasdale area, they have a good ceremony. So there are lots of ceremonies happening, and I encourage you to go out and to participate and to remember. I have been at numerous military events this past year, and I can tell you that the time is very, very important to support our military. It is very important to honor past service members, current service members, and future service members, and to acknowledge that we are in a time of global strife that is very unstable right now. And our service members are out there doing incredible work across our world, and recognizing those who have kept us safe and sovereign are really critical and important. So my gratitude to past, current, and future service members, and to all of you for taking the time to remember and to honor. With that, I wish you all a very good Friday, and I shall see you next week.